This is the third turn of our 2020 aerobic composting heap. We're going to get right into it. Oh, this tarp is hot. We got some good action going right now. Alright, here are some ingredients that I've lined up for the next turn. Here are rhubarb leaves, and there's a burdock leaf fan, half a root underneath those. And we'll see if we can get this root to come out. It never always comes out. I always snap it. Ooh, I'm going to snap the... Oh, there it is. I almost broke the shovel. I've done that before too. Let's see how much of this we got. Oh, not that much. That's a thick root. Now, burdock has a lot of iron in it, so that's an iron component to the compost, root and all. This here is actually yacon leaves that I compacted into this little cooler, and I filled it with water, and I put a couple bricks on top so the leaves would stay underwater. So it fermented in that cooler, I'm positive. I put it in there last October. Then we have 2 pails of ant tailings with walnut hull or walnut husk component to it that I buried in there last fall. This is an ant mound. Last fall I cleaned black walnuts and I buried the green husks into this ant mound. You can see it's kind of dark. You can see the residue of it here being dark. And I've done this quite a few years in a row where I buried them in the fall. And my primary purpose of burying them was to preserve them for the compost for the next year. And then I had the idea of burying them in an ant mound because some of these ant mounds are getting really big and I wanted to kind of slow down their growth a little bit. Here's a good batch right here. And then I'm also incorporating the properties or the elements of what the ants are bringing in from all over the area. And the 2 main elements in the ant tailings that I'm interested in is potassium and phosphates. And the main ingredient that I'm interested in with the walnut, I'm calling them husks. That's the green outer, that's the soft membrane around the nut itself, around the shell. And then inside the shell is the seed. But in that green soft membrane is iodine. And I'm sure there are a lot of other elements in both of these 2. A nice batch right there. And I'm trying not to dig them too deep because I don't want to kill the ants. I've been harvesting on this ant mound here for a long time. And I haven't killed them yet. If you don't kill the queen, you're good. Then they build this all back up into a really big mound. For the iodine, we have more sod. I threw some sod in these buckets of water. Half of this water is actually water from a barrel that I fermented comfrey and burdock leaves in way the middle of last summer. So that's old stuff, and the water actually turned black. Whereas the newer ones, the ones that I did last fall, actually have a green color to them. And we have 2 more tree pots full of greens, mostly garlic mustard. We're starting to get a handle on it now. I've got 1 area left yet to harvest or weed out, and that's in the black raspberries. And that's probably done for this compost pile. We're going to go on to other things like comfrey and burdock. And I've got more sod. Oh, and there's a chickadee come visit us here. They come through in bunches. And the sod I actually threw in this water to hydrate it. I'll probably do some more of that. I think this time I'll take some of these round balls, these larger round balls that are manure. They have a little bit harder time getting digested. I think I'm going to throw some of those in some water too this time and pour the water right back onto the pile. So here we go. Oh yeah. Smells good too. You know you got a good compost heap when it smells good. Alright. This is kind of the lower center here. Let's get these yacons in here. Some soil on the bottom of this thing. I guess we'll leave that soil out of it. Now it smells just like it's fermented too. It smells like a lacto ferment this time. Yeah. Yacon is another ancient American food plant. Developed, I'm sure, over centuries of trial and error, speciation. Yeah, speciation. Looks like it's really bright in the camera. So we got a long way to go on this pile. It's the 10th. I'm going to try to keep it going until the end of the month. So about 20 days. Now we're going to be working the pile towards the other pile. So we want to be on the top with our green and our additions towards the old pile. This time I'm going to take some off. It's close here to start making some room. Here's some sod that's been in the action. You can see it's getting wore out there a little bit. Eating up. I can tell it's dry, so it's probably a good idea to be soaking them with water first. I never tried that. It's a good idea. Yeah, I see a little bit of that white bacteria again. Purpose of lengthening the turns out is to get so I can see that white bacteria every time. At 2 days, sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. When I get beyond 2 days, then it starts to show up. Well, this time the flip is about almost 3 days. Probably we're looking at 2 days and 17 hours. You can see the slot that I made now between the piles. That'll hold our larger pieces that roll off so that they remain on the bottom. they're in here, they don't roll off anymore. After I get the next pail of water on, we'll save one of our pails of water for putting some of these larger chunks in there, and letting them dissolve in the water, and then pouring the water on the pile. Yeah, I don't know if I want to put too much more sod in here. The missus is giving it to me too fast. Oh, we can always put it at the end. Slowly work it in as we go. If we let it dry out, then that ain't gonna help us either. Nice moisture in the middle of the pile. We want to protect the center of this pile by getting it nice and hydrated. That's a crabgrass in that side. Here that's soaked in water. It's rainwater from last year, stored in that barrel. It's been very dry this year, so this year it's been a big payoff to save some of that rainwater from last year in those 55-gallon drums. I think there's 8 of them here. This is a mixture of jewelweed and achira. Achira is another ancient American food staple crop, main crop. I think I read someplace that it was actually the main crop for a while. People grow it now for the starch. I've seen pictures on the internet of big achira plantations, which isn't anything like I'm interested in. I'm interested in diversity. And permaculture is a real simple sentence that spells out pretty much all of it, and that's diversity leads to stability. So we think about that a little bit. I'm going to put a simple explanation to it. I talked last time about natural succession, but that requires a wild diversity. When one particular species or a subset of species or a group of species fail, there are species there that automatically picks up the space. And that's what humans have interrupted. So with these achira plantations, they don't want it to fail, obviously. They put capital into it. Capital in terms of finances and labor and propagating the plants to get them up to the number they needed. That's all capital, and they don't want to lose that capital. So if a disease or a pest comes along, right away they start spraying. And that's the problem. Whereas permaculture, it does teach about gardening, which is kind of the less of the ways or the methods to grow soil fertility. But actually what it's promoting is the gardens aren't for itself to be creating stability. It's to keep the humans from utilizing the areas that are benefiting by wildlife diversity and natural succession. So let's put a little hair on it first. No, let's get some more water. I got water. We're going to keep using it till it's gone. Now, permaculture identifies 5 ways of growing soil fertility. And the less of the 5 is home gardens and composting. Number 4 would be prairies. Number 3 would be forests. I will let that soak in there a little bit. Number 2 would be small lakes and ponds. Water captures airborne nutrient and holds it, and the small lakes and ponds become one of those hyper wildlife diversity hotspots, and wildlife is what creates fertility. Living and eating and secreting and dying all contributes. And number 1 are marine estuaries. Hotspot of wildlife. All 5 of those systems are a positive. They're positive on the landscape. They're both producing, for lack of better words, of producing carbohydrates and nutrition, at the same time growing soil fertility. Much different than the other systems that aren't included. That's mostly all agriculture or orchards, or those are all draws on the system. Even in some cases you might have a positive, like say in some of these regenerative systems that they're consulting to these rich landowners to flip their systems into this regenerative process, which basically relies mostly on large farm animals. But even though they might be growing soil fertility, it's not diverse, and sooner or later it catches up to them, and that disease and pathogens do load up in the system, and it kills those main farm animals. Farm animals also kind of like mine singular elements. They have to stay alive, and those elements that they really truly need for growth and survival, that's what they're interested in eating, consuming. And of course, if it contributes to their growth, there's something lost in the system. Sooner or later, we got the Sumerian nomads during the Sumerian times. You know, they probably lasted the longest, 2,500 years, that we're aware of. And that's because they kept moving around. And the areas that they vacated had a chance to go back into wild succession and build up the nutrients again. Ooh, that one's really dry. So probably the indigenous cultures that were truly sustainable on the landscape were those that were semi-permanent, but even though they had permanence, they would move around. There is an African system that persisted for a long time, probably longer than the nomads, and that's that the village would be in the center of a forested landscape. They wouldn't have many trees in where the village was. They would have living areas and meeting areas, and then surrounding, you know, say that's in a circular pattern. The village was in a circular pattern. They didn't have a lot of people in it, you know, probably 100, 150 at the most. And then surrounding the village in the forest, just on the outskirts of the village, would be 2-acre circles. And there'd be a dozen of them, 13, 15 of them around the perimeter of the village. They would utilize one of those 2-acre spots to grow their main crops. Of course, you know, they're harvesting the wild components of the forest surrounding the village too, so they didn't need to have a huge amount of storage crops or main crops. They would farm one of those a year. Sometimes maybe they would go 2 years. Depends, I suppose, on their soil type and climate. And when they were done with it, their 1 or 2 years, they would abandon it to whatever wants to grow. They would farm the next one. And since it goes back to the wild, what happens is whatever elements that are depleted, there are specialists that will come into the area first. They're specialists at accumulating some of these minerals that are in very short supply through the atmosphere, even through the soil. And over time, over years, it would build that depleted mineral back up. And by the time they got around back to it, several years later, a dozen, 15, 20 years later, it was ready to go for the next main crop growth. They would just keep that up. And since you're tied that closely to the land, they had special rules on children. You just couldn't grow more children than what you could support. Some cultures even had rules where the men couldn't take a wife until he was an older age, like in his 50s. So the idea was there, you know, to limit the children a bit, the procreation, And at the same time, you were breeding from proven stock. You weren't some idiot that just, went off and abandoned the area or died of some stupid move out there in the forest. You were proven. Sounds ruthless, but sounds better than what conditions we're finding ourselves in now. We're all operating on a system where the growth of the population has outstripped the ability of the experimenters on the landscape to grow food to feed us all. There's like 800 million now around the world that are starving. And with this virus, I'm sure that's going to really double or triple quickly. Not my fault. Well, it probably was partly my fault because I didn't know about it. But somebody designed the system, and that's what we all learned how to live in. And now we're about to enter an era where everything's going to be in short supply. Starting right now. This isn't something that we're going to wait and see what happens anymore. It's going on right now. And I don't know, the United States might be worse off because they were so addicted and used to all the easiest things. We're about to find out. Get some more water. Oh no, we got some here. With the sod. It's decent water, decent moisture in it. I'm neglecting my greens. Too busy talking and not thinking. Here's the burdock. I know burdock has a lot of iron in it. I got half of the root there. We're going to digest that root too. Oh yeah. Let's get one of these ant tailings and black walnut hulls in here. if I wasn't adding anything, this would be winding down, because it's an 18-day process. And this is day 10 already. But because I want to continue adding, utilizing all the wild plants that are springing up, at the same time adding as many elements into the compost as is available in the area. Plus I have some other ingredients that I'm going to add from out of the area. We'll do that maybe next time. And I believe this is probably the most rich compost that's been made in the state of Wisconsin ever. How about that for a bit of bravado? Oh, I got some stinging nettle in here too. There was a little patch of stinging nettle where I was picking or pulling garlic mustard. I was trying to get the garlic mustard by the roots and all. I probably succeeded 3/4 of the time, but even then you'd see a bit of it would bust off, so we're not going to be ending our garlic mustard growth anytime soon. But we're definitely slowing down the process. I read a study a couple years ago where garlic mustard sends out a chemical to retard the growth of competitors, but the local plants are adjusting to it now. So now they're going to start fighting back probably. That's how the biology in this plant works. I was watching a video this winter on bacteria, and they were showing slides of bacteria and they were killing it, or trying to kill it. They put it on the slide, they would inject it with something, or cover it with something that would kill it, and invariably a couple of them would survive it. And then those would go on to breed very quickly, because bacteria breeds very quickly, and fill up the next part of the slide. Then they would kill it with an even stronger dose. Same thing would happen. Then they would kill it with a stronger dose. Same thing would happen. Until finally you just couldn't kill it with that poison anymore. So that's a process that's continuing to happen all the time. Not to say that all plants compete that way. They don't. Some get along very well in polycultures. They benefit each other. But we got some really good soil moisture here. Yeah, let's keep going and get this slide. Then we'll think about to add something else. So we got a lot of these little balls of manure hanging around the bottom of the pile now. I haven't rolled off. I'm going to get some water and dissolve them in the water. Pour it back on. Phil Mollison said that if we could just get 10% of the people to build gardens like this, that's all it would take. We would transform the landscape overnight. So I was talking to my dad a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about some of the problems going on. And I remember he said this when he was young, very young. I was very young. There was high unemployment at the time. He said, you know, if we were out there working in the fields, we wouldn't have a shortage of jobs. Well, the way that his dad truck farmed, maybe it wasn't very efficient, but sure did require all the kids they had to get the job done. So I said, you know, we could do that here in this city. We don't have high-rise apartments here, so there isn't really a concentration of people in relationship to the land. And I could see where all of our lawns, or most of our lawns, our gardens, they were growing maybe 25% to 50%. During World War II, we were growing 50% of the food in gardens that people ate. So if we grow 50% of the food in our gardens, and then surrounding area are all truck farms, just in the surround of the city, we could have a surplus of food here. That's at 30,000 people, 100,000 people in this county. If we designed it right, it could happen. And I think hard times are coming. And I look at my little postage stamp backyard, which is probably twice as big as of a normal yard. Probably 0.4 of an acre. It's not a half an acre, it's less than a half an acre. And somebody do the calculations for me. It's 66 by 333. And what I'm thinking is, you know, it could get bad enough where people get kind of desperate, and then they're going to have to make a choice. Are they going to come here and steal the food I have? I mean, I'm playing out a bad worst case scenario, and I don't know what's going to happen, so I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm just playing out the scenario. In a bad case scenario, what are these people going to do that are desperate? And when you're hungry, you do things that you wouldn't do if everything was normal. So are they going to steal the food I have? Or are people going to recognize it for what it is and copy it? That's the question. That's the experiment of this yard in the worst case scenario, in a bad case scenario. I don't know what they're going to do. I'm sure there's bad guys that are going to be bad no matter what. But there's a lot of good people. What are the good people going to do? It'll be interesting to find out. Because I think we're heading there right now. The odds are increasing. Okay, here's our manure tea. Ooh, that looks nice and rich here. Definitely is breaking apart. Okay, we pretty much cleaned out 2 barrels that I had stored of the material that was used to make the tea. To review, last summer I had a lot of water in the storage tanks. It was raining a lot, and I took the green material that was growing around the property and packed it into the barrels. I actually had a cedar post. I put some in the barrel and then I pounded it down a little bit. 2 barrels, I pounded down ridiculously tight. And I filled it with water. And that's what this material is that I'm going to get out of the barrels. That's wet and has kind of a pale green color. It's fermented green material. So I got 2 of those barrels, and I have 4 more left. And I've got another one over here with hair in it. And I've got 2 open barrels that I'm using just to collect water. So how many barrels is that? 9 barrels here. 7 of them are being used for storing water and green material for composting. I stored it from last year, and now I'm composting it this year. Oh, we got that manure here yet. I hope that helicopter's not black. Oh, it's black. There's something about black helicopters going around like, I don't know, a dozen years ago or something. Yeah. At least he's not hovering over my place. That's the UN. They want to check out my compost pile. Well, you don't need a helicopter for that. You can just come on over. I got an extra fork. Who's what do they call him? The General Council of the UN? Guerra or something? Come on over. Well, I don't know. Maybe you got COVID, so I might not want you over. Yeah, this is a nice pile here. Dark brown, that's the color you want it to be. If it turns black, then it's anaerobic. Yeah, the hair's almost gone. I've seen some, but not many. So I gotta find another. Oh, here's a stem of horsetail that's still intact. That was in the very beginning of the pile, so that's 10 days old. It's the only one I've seen, so most of them are, all the rest of them gotta be 8. I'm gonna have to start adding more what's in those barrels. Our catalysts are fish, deer fat, and hair are gone, pretty much. So we need a new nitrogen catalyst to keep this going. And I got 1, 2, 3, 4 more barrels left. Now we're coming into a stretch of warm temperatures, or warmer. It's been pretty cold the last couple days. This weekend was kind of a freaky, cold, wet conditions. It's almost like there was something odd in the air. I didn't like it, but I didn't go outside much. Now that the sun is out, now it feels better. Finished. Alright, it looks really good. I'm going to have to get aggressive now with the green material to keep it hot. So we'll see you next turn, a couple of days or so.